We're on an overnight hike in the Wollemi National Park, starting out at Mountain Lagoon just north of Bilpin in the Blue Mountains, where we'll be travelling along a couple of ridge lines and then descending down to the Colo River, where we'll stay overnight at the Colo Meroo Campground by the river. This is a decent hike, around 20 kilometres and 1,000 metres of elevation gain. It's a mix of fire trail, overgrown ridge lines and some scrambling to get down to the river. We've got some pretty mild weather over the next few days, which makes a change from the heatwave conditions we've had in Sydney recently. Hiking in the Australian summer can be pretty challenging at times, so you've got to pick your window of opportunity. And while it might be a bit overcast, it definitely beats a stinking hot summer day out in the hot sun. Still, we should get some good views along the way, assuming the weather stays good. On this hike, we're exploring works by Alenka Zupančič, a Slovenian philosopher and theorist who has written many books exploring great thinkers like Kant and Nietzsche, often through the lens of Lacanian psychoanalysis. This is her latest book, Disavowel, which explores the way people in the modern world avoid the confrontation of traumatic knowledge, not through denial, but by the perverse form of reasoning that accepts facts intellectually while acting as though they don't exist or don't matter. In effect, the knowledge becomes the defense mechanism against what it knows. Often called fetishistic disavowal, the process uses an object or ritual to stand in place for this knowledge, allowing the truth to be suspended through this act of engaging with it. According to Zupančič, this is becoming the dominant way that we engage with uncomfortable truths in our society, meaning that we're not equipped to deal with the big problems we face. It's also the process by which our political leaders are able to get away with so much more these days while operating in plain sight. Now, this book isn't about moralizing on certain political positions, whether that is disavowal or flat-out denial of issues like climate change, structural inequality, capitalism. Although the book does use these as examples. Instead, we are trying to understand the psychological patterns at play, to quote Zupančič, to concretely pursue the social context and philosophical underpinnings of anxiety that leads to disavowal. In effect, we can't escape disavowal, but we can understand its impact on our lives and politics. trail narrows quite significantly here. We are smashing through spiderwebs here. There's the Colo River. So we've reached the first point on our hike where we've got a bit of a view. Fortunately, the weather's not great at the moment. It's very misty out there. There's a bit of rain around. We can see the Colo River down there quite well though, so that's pretty nice. The hike so far has been pretty easy going. It's just been following the ridge line. There's a little bit of a hill at the start, but apart from that, it's been pretty flat. A little overgrown in places, but in all, pretty easy going. Alenka Zupančič starts her discussion of disavowal by citing the mechanism famously articulated by Octave Menoni, "I know well, but all the same." This psychological process is not a simple denial of the truth, but instead is one of intellectually accepting a fact while acting as if it does not exist. In effect, we take some traumatic knowledge that undermines our beliefs and reintegrate it with all its contradictions back into our belief system. In effect, hiding it in plain sight. Let's use a childhood example. Most of us grow up believing in Santa Claus, but at some point we realize that, of course, Santa is not real. But it's not the lack of a big fat man delivering presents at Christmas that is the traumatic knowledge. Or maybe that is the case for some people. It's more that we have been deceived by our parents, the main symbol of authority and truth for a young child. This betrayal of trust demonstrates to the child that their parents are flawed humans who can lie, thus threatening the child's entire sense of security. The disavowal becomes the knowledge that the child's parents are flawed and fallible, but the child continues to believe all the same, that they remain good parents. And here the term fetishistic disavowal comes into play, since not only do we disavow the traumatic knowledge, but we use an object or ritual to stand in for it, the fetish object. In this case, the continued giving of presents at Christmas. Zupančič writes, "The fundamental trick of the fetishist disavowal is that it transfers the disavowed belief, the but all the same part, to an object, a fetish, liberating the subject from all forms of unconscious belief. This means that it is not even that I unconsciously keep believing what I know to be otherwise. In a way, I am free from every belief, even unconscious ones, because it is my fetish that believes for me." And just as this process plays out in a child, we see the same pattern at the social level. We can see it in our modern political paralysis. We as citizens know that our government is impotent when it comes to fixing social issues, whether it is the cost of housing, creating a fairer economy, or environmental issues. Yet fully acknowledging this would require a revolt or accepting the fact that we are unrepresented. Instead, we use the fetishistic object of democracy, voting, watching political news, engaging in debates, not because we believe in it, but because the alternative, that the state is not going to save us and that we are alone, is too terrifying to face. It's like a bit of a makeshift campsite here. It could be used anyway in a pinch. Looks like this could be the descent. Looks like the campground up ahead. So it started to rain pretty heavily again. I'm just taking shelter under the camp kitchen here. Fortunately, this campground has some pretty good facilities. Trying to decide whether we're going to pitch the tent out in the rain, or we could just put it under the cover here and have a pretty dry night. So we might end up doing that. For now, we're just going to have a bit of food and take it easy. There's a great sketch on the Mitchell and Webb show about the fate of Pompeii, where a Roman soothsayer warns a high-ranking official about the ominous signs coming from Mount Vesuvius. The mountain is smoking, the earth is trembling, and disaster is clearly imminent. However, instead of organising an evacuation and confronting the real, the official proposes a different solution, sorting their rubbish into separate bins. Despite the obvious parallels this suggests with our modern world, the sketch perfectly captures the 3 stages of disavowal that Zupančič outlines. Firstly, they acknowledge the facts. They do not deny the danger of the active volcano. Secondly, the "but all the same" is the act of recycling, a fetish object that psychologically protects them from the traumatic truth and that finally allows them to carry on as normal. But there are many other great examples of this in film and literature. Zupančič talks about the film Don't Look Up, that demonstrates how even smart people can disavow reality. In the film, people don't lack information about the incoming comet. Instead, they lack the ability to let the information break their frame of reality. We see scientists on a talk show clearly provide the raw data. A comet is going to hit Earth and we are all going to die. The show hosts do not deny the claim, but merely respond with jokes stating, "We like to keep the bad news light here." The end of the world ends up being a segment between the weather and celebrity gossip. We also see the comet turn into an opportunity for mining and wealth creation, essentially using profit and market forces as the fetish object. Some people literally believe that the free market will fix all of our problems. However, Zupančič argues that raising awareness is a failed political strategy. This approach assumes that the public is ignorant, that if people just have enough facts, then they will be able to change their behavior. The problem is, as we already know, it's not a lack of information, but a structural inability to let the information affect our behavior. In fact, she argues that raising awareness may even be making the problem worse. If we already know the truth, then preaching and lecturing to people can actually make them more cynical. Zupančič argues that in our society, the act of being informed serves as a psychological substitute for doing something. By reading or sharing an article on social media, we discharge the anxiety of the crisis and feel a sense of accomplishment. This creates a paradox. The more aware we are, the less likely we are to act, because the act of becoming aware has already satisfied our internal pressure to do something. The goal, therefore, is not more information, but a confrontation with the real. Zupančič defines emancipatory thinking not as a method for preserving the status quo, but as a refusal to perform the ideological work of making a broken system appear natural or inevitable. Instead, we must dismantle disavowal by identifying and locating the gap, the structural contradiction where the logic of the system fails. We usually paper over this gap to maintain an illusion of coherence, yet Zupančič argues that this is actually the site of possibility. True freedom comes when we stop trying to fix the glitch and instead recognize it as the precise location where agency and politics re-enter the frame. By inhabiting the break rather than concealing it, we realize that the current state of affairs was never inevitable, and that it is from this fracture that we can start building. For example, once we accept that infinite growth on a finite planet is a logical impossibility, and that the market can't solve the problem it created, This forces a re-entry of politics for systemic change and degrowth. Zupančič writes, "Emancipatory thinking is not about explaining away the gap and making everything look natural. That is the job of ideology. Emancipatory thinking is about identifying and locating the gap in causality, this glitch, this point of decision where responsibility, agency, and politics come into play, and where things could or should have taken a different direction." So we've got a tent set up under the cover tonight, so things should be pretty dry. So it was a very wet night, a lot of very heavy rain all throughout the night. We were lucky to have the shelter to stay dry in. But it seems to have cleared up quite a bit now, so we're going to wander down to the Colo River and take a bit of a look around. Colo River. Zupančič describes a famous story originally reported by Freud about the father who dreams of his burning child. In this story, the father is exhausted after nursing his sick child for days and nights on end, who has unfortunately died. The father falls asleep in the next room, leaving the door open to where his son's coffin now lies. After a few hours of sleep, he dreams that his child is standing over him, grabs him by the arm and says reproachfully, "Father, don't you see I'm burning?" At this point, he wakes up to see a bright glare of light from the adjoining room and hurries back to find that a candle has fallen onto the coffin and is starting to burn. The standard formulation is that the father has incorporated the smell of smoke into his dream as his son speaks to him, and then wakes up when this external intrusion becomes too much. He wakes up to face the reality of the fire. But Zupančič flips this. She says that the father wakes up to escape the dream. The message within his dream, his child crying, "Can't you see I'm burning?" contains the traumatic guilt of his child's death, and he therefore flees into reality to deal with the more manageable problem at hand, putting out the fire. This is the process of waking up to escape the truth, and is something we commonly see in everyday behaviour. For example, in the wake of an atrocity, both natural or man-made, we immediately wake up into a world of cause and logistics rather than facing the horror itself. We debate what led to the situation, who is to blame, what controls should be put in place, such as gun controls or restrictions on speech. Not that any of these are bad per se, but they serve to insulate us from the trauma of the real. Another example is doom scrolling the news, consuming every detail of the latest war, virus, or scandal so that we feel we are confronting them, but instead we keep it at a distance on our screens or in our newsfeed to avoid the anxiety of the actual events. Finally, we avoid the emptiness and meaningless of our lives by being productive. We check our phones, go to the gym, work overtime. We are waking up to participate in the grind in order to escape the nightmare of having to ask ourselves who we actually are. This waking up is a way of restoring control. We run to this structured reality, our work, news, shopping, or working out, to hide from the real, our guilt, our trauma and emptiness that we cannot control. Zupančič writes, "It often happens with dreams that we wake up so as to go on dreaming. This is particularly true for nightmares, and generally true for the dreams in which a real appears that is more real, more traumatic and shattering than our everyday reality. So, in response, we wake up to reality and proclaim to be awake in order to be able to continue to dream. That is, to continue to exist more or less untouched, unscathed by the real that has just appeared. Which is why the real nightmare is precisely one from which we cannot wake up." Let's challenge ourselves as hikers with a critical interrogation of our own behaviour. It's 5 a.m, we pack our bags, drive to the trailhead and escape into the wilderness, ostensibly leaving the chaotic noise of the modern world behind. On the mountain, we trade the ambiguity of modern life for a hyper-structured reality. A clear goal, the summit, rigid rules, the trail, and immediate physical feedback. But we must ask, are we using this physical intensity of the ascent to drown out the existential intensity of the void? Is this exertion just a sophisticated form of disavowal, a way to physically act out so we don't have to mentally confront the meaningless of our daily routine. By waking up to the alarm, we are desperately trying to re-establish ourselves as capable living subjects. I hike, therefore I am. The paradox is that we do not retreat into nature to find ourselves, but to flee the realization that we are already lost. We jolt ourselves awake into the reality of the hike, precisely so we can continue sleeping through the trauma of our actual existence. Psychoanalysis calls this the flight into health. The closer we get to the real, that underlying traumatic truth of our alienation, the more we recoil into a state of manic hyperactivity. We become fitness junkies or workaholics, filling every silence with healthy productivity to keep the repressed truth from surfacing. This is self-improvement as denial. So, do we hike to confront the gap in our reality, or do we hike to prove to ourselves that the gaps were never there? Zupančič argues that disavowel has become the default setting of modern culture. And this is not by accident, but because the structural conditions of our society have changed. It is no longer a psychological quirk of a few individuals, but a systemic necessity. Firstly, information overload means that we can't claim we don't know. We have only two options open to us, to deny or to disavow. It is the survival mechanism that allows us to acknowledge the problem while feeling powerless to do anything about it. Disavowel is also required in the modern capitalist world we live in. We treat commodities as special objects, even while we know that a shoe was sewn together in a third world sweatshop, yet we still treat it as a vessel of status and coolness. The system requires us to look away, to ignore the exploitation and the animal cruelty, since there is no other way to participate in the system. These things give rise to the post-truth world, which is essentially the political weaponization of disavowal. We see political leaders no longer needing to hide the truth, instead operating in plain sight. When a leader lies, they'll often double down, their supporters saying, "I know he is lying, but all the same, he's on our side." Truth has become secondary to function. If the lie works, if it makes us feel good and it owns our opponent, then we accept it. We have shifted from valuing truth to valuing narrative. Disavowel is rising because we are squeezed between two impossible forces. Total knowledge, we now see all the world's horrors, and total impotence, we feel powerless to stop them. Disavowel is the psychological shield that prevents us from being crushed by this knowledge. Yet, Zupančič gives us hope through emancipatory thinking. It is the hope that comes not from denying the fracture in our lives, but from stepping directly into it. By converting this crisis into a site of possibility, we stop trying to survive the status quo and start finally beginning the work and building a life free from disavowal. So another great hike. The first section was Fire Trail, which was easy going but a little boring. But once we got to the bush track, it was a lot more interesting, despite having to cop a lot of spider webs to the face. There were some really good sections along the cliff edge with some great views over the Colo River. And then there was the steep descent with some rocky scrambles that were a bit sketchy in places. And unfortunately, I copped some heavy rain during that section. There was literally water running over some of the rocks, making it extremely slippery. But it was all worth it once we reached the river. The Colo River is very beautiful. And there's a version of this walk where you can actually follow the river up a couple of kilometers and then take a different track back to Mountain Lagoon. Should check that out in the future. Sounds quite interesting. So mostly interesting track with a challenging descent and a track that disappears regularly, so make sure you have a map handy. This one is recommended.